Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Much of our content surrounds lowering your toxic chemical burdens through things that you can't actually control, such as food you eat, the products you use. Unfortunately, sometimes toxic chemical exposures are beyond our control. According to the data compiled by the Coalition to Prevent Chemical Disasters, a chemical fire explosion or toxic release occurs actually every 2 days in the US. Once the disaster happens, its effect can linger for a long time. And these effects may not only be detrimental to the environment, they can also be hazardous to your health. So it's really, really important that we are prepared. We have prepared ourselves for these scenarios, and then also take proper precautions once a disaster happens to ensure the health and safety of our families and ourselves. That's why we're really happy to be chatting today with Dr. Anne-Marie Fine. Dr. Fine is an environmental medicine and detox expert who works at EMEI to provide presentations and resource materials about how to prepare a chemical disaster. So during this live, we're going to talk about the health implications of environmental disasters, things we can do to protect ourselves, and also the EMEI program on can you survive a chemical disaster. So, hi, Dr. Fan. For those who don't really know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in environmental medicine.
Yes, I am a licensed naturopathic doctor, and I got interested in environmental medicine when I saw that my patients just weren't getting better with the normal treatments that we were providing. And I realized that there was another layer underneath everything that we were already seeing that was really under-recognized in medicine, and that is the environmental toxicant, the body burden of toxins, how that impacts human beings and their illnesses. And in particular, I noticed this in my female patients and with the high degree of autoimmune disease and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And so I started thinking about, well, what are the females doing differently from the males? And I realized, well, one of the problems was personal care products. And that really, when I started scrutinizing this particular grouping of consumer products, I started realizing that the BPA and phthalates, the very things that your company tests for, are really coming into our female patients' diet and our men too, from personal care products and just everyday exposure and everyday consumer items. And so I got very interested. Why? Because this is a low-hanging fruit. You can teach your patients and people that you encounter, you can teach them how to substitute clean products. And because some of these, like BT and phthalates, have shorter half-lives, you're done. Once you've substituted the cleaner thing, there's no detox that has to happen. It's going to happen naturally. But because things like BPA are so ubiquitous in our environment, even though they may have a short half-life, according to the NHANES study and all the data for thousands of Americans, about 93 to 95% of Americans have been found to have BPA in their urine samples. And that's even with a short half-life. That just means they're constantly being exposed. So that's how I got into environmental medicine. It totally makes a difference.
Okay, now today, environmental medicine, many people might not be familiar with this jargon, this term. Like, for those who don't know, what exactly is environmental medicine?
It's an emerging specialty of medicine that really looks at the exposome, our environment, for different factors that influence our health. And what are those? There are toxins in our environment, in our air, in our water, in our food, in our personal care products, in our consumer products, but it's also includes mold. It includes chronic infections, and it's basically everything in around you, but it doesn't include genetics. And so the big take-home message with the Human Genome Project that was completed years ago was that it's really not genes that are driving diseases, but it's really environmental factors. So that's what we look at.
You founded EMEI, and then EMEI now is creating a ton of content and material, which we're going to talk about today. So, but first, like, tell us, like, what is EMEI? What do you guys do there?
Well, EMEI stands for Environmental Medicine Education International, and we teach physicians from all over the world. We have a 1-year postdoc training program for physicians and also advanced practice nurses and other healthcare professionals. We train them how to become experts in environmental medicine so that they can utilize this in their clinic to become more successful, to have more success with their patients. So that's our main goal, is to train these doctors. And we've been doing it. We're on our 3rd year. And then just recently we decided, oh my gosh, with the recent events in East Palestine, we really, and now the Maui fires, we really need to reach out to consumers because they may not have an environmental medicine doctor. There really aren't that many of us. And so we decided for the first time to offer a course to consumers on what to do in a chemical disaster. And that's what we're having a webinar, a free webinar on September 11th on can you survive a chemical disaster? And we're going to talk about a chemical disaster called 9/11, which was 20 years ago, right? And we're still learning lessons from that. And we're going to discuss that during the webinar and then offer the chance to register for our course in surviving an environmental chemical disaster, because they're happening like, oh gosh, like every other day. And the effects of these chemicals, they're under-recognized by everybody involved, not just the people who are living in close proximity. They're really under-recognized. The influence is far-reaching.
So, what exactly is a chemical disaster? You mentioned the East Palestine. I think that people can't understand because, they see smokes and then they see all these. But I also thought 9/11 is the harder for people to understand. That's also, besides, a human disaster, everything else, it's also a chemical disaster. So, like, could you give some examples, like what we
Yes, I will.
heard?
In the case of 9/11, it was really thought that the big disaster was the loss of lives during, the fires and the collapse of the World Trade Centers, which it's true, right? That absolutely happened. However, at the same time, what was unrecognized and unappreciated was that collapse of those tall buildings created a toxic cloud, cement, asbestos, PCBs, jet fuel, the plastic debris from thousands and thousands of computers, lead and mercury. I mean, it just created this cloud. The fire burned for apparently a few weeks. And so these people who lived in close proximity and the first responders, they were exposed to that, and yet they were told that the air was safe. They were told, right, by the EPA that the air was safe. And so they acted, they didn't wear protective gear. And now what we're seeing 20 years later is there's a World Trade Center fund for these people who were chemically injured and wound up with either a disease or cancer. And so there are lessons to be learned from that. And then in East Palestine, nearly 1 million pounds of vinyl chloride burned. It burned in this East Palestine area, and they evacuated for a short period of time, but then they were told it's good, you can come home. And yet the people of East Palestine are still complaining to this day of certain health effects and not really getting the answers that they really need to get better. And so that was one of the instigators for this course, was I wanted to be able to reach out and teach people a few things. Like one of them is, how can you research? Like, the media did say what burned, what chemical burned, but nobody really knows what's vinyl chloride. Is it bad for you? It's a known human carcinogen. It's very bad, and it's a cause of a rare kind of liver cancer. And so one of the things my partner and I did is we wrote a white paper on vinyl chloride and dioxins, and we were speaking in New York City at a big integrative health conference, and we were able to hand out our white papers to the doctors, because even the doctors aren't really aware of what vinyl chloride is and what harms it can cause.
Well, two things to echo. I know that a lot of doctors, they don't get any training in environmental medicine. Even if you want to specialize, that's like a way later. So we're like totally like under supplied by by environmental medicine doctors. And you mentioned that the chemical disaster happens almost every other day in the US. Like, in your opinion, why are these disasters happen so frequently these days?
I actually don't have an answer for that. I don't know why. I really don't. Except that because there's over 100,000 different chemicals in the environment, they have to be moved around by train or by truck. And so the potential for accidents, do exist. But other than that, I can't really speak to, why they're happening. But I think we need to be aware, because it happen to any of us, really.
Yeah. Is there anything that we should do as citizens that could help prevent chemical disasters?
I don't know about preventing chemical disasters, but I am all about being prepared for chemical disasters. And I think there's some really smart things that people can do, such as keeping a supply of bottled water or something, in your kitchen or in your garage. You want to have a clean source of water. Water is one of the first things that's going to be polluted, right? So you do want to have that. You do want to have some safety, gear in case you need to evacuate. You want to have a bag, and you want to pack it with certain things that are critical to take with you. So there are some things that, you can do to prepare to evacuate, prepare to have a clean source of water. But also in our course, we give you some really specific things to do, like on how to seal your house. Let's say you're not evacuating and you want to seal your house so that the air is not coming through. I will say this, because I don't think people realize, but our indoor air in our homes is a lot more polluted than our outdoor air, because we have so many things on the indoor off-gassing into our air. But where does our indoor air come from? It comes from the outdoor air. This is where we get the beginning of our air. And then we off-gas our couches, our cabinets, off-gas formaldehyde, our carpets, and adhesives and padding, off-gas styrene, and there's BPA in carpets too, and a lot of other. We have a lot of things that are making our indoor air even worse. But in the event of a chemical disaster, you want to be able to seal your house and hopefully have an air filter already so that you can start filtering your air. Those are two good places to start.
You pretty much answered exactly the next question I was going to ask is, how do we prepare ourselves? But in terms of like a different type of disaster, are there things that we can do? And then also different survival techniques?
Yeah, I think the first survival technique is to be a critical thinker. And yeah, it is. And I know the media has, they've kind of done this more than once. They declare a particular area safe. And I want the people that I talk to, I want them to do their own research. And I have one of the videos I have in my course is how to do chemical research, how to figure out the effects of certain chemicals on yourself. And I want people to do that. And I want them to discern for themselves and the health of their family, should I stick around or should I leave? Even though we're not being evacuated, would it be better? Is my wife pregnant? Is there a fetus involved? Should we just all leave just due to an abundance of caution or knowing that this particular chemical has undesirable effects on the fetus or the mother or the children, right? The children are more vulnerable to these chemicals as well. So I think the first one people need to have is critical thinking. And then secondly, I think they need the air and the water are the two most important items to have locked down in case you're in a chemical disaster.
Mhm. So I know like when disaster happens and then sometimes there's like inadequate response, false solutions or false promises. So what are some examples for people to spot out and then so they can avoid these bad responses, solutions or promises?
For example, in East Palestine, there's been they just dioxin is the second most carcinogenic substance on Earth, and it's created in the burning of certain materials like vinyl chloride, and so for a long time in East Palestine, they weren't even testing for dioxin, and then they did start to test for dioxin, but they said the levels are really low. And then some independent testers came in and they got different results. But the data, it's hard to tell from the data how much dioxin is really there. But dioxin, it's super critical to know, to learn about dioxin. And one of the biggest lessons that we have in dioxin toxicity is an old event in Seveso, Italy. Okay, in Seveso, Italy, they had a factory blow up and it created a bunch of dioxin, and they did evacuate for some period of time. It was kind of a short-ish period of time. But what they did do is they took blood samples of dioxin from thousands of residents and tracked their health for 40 years. This is all published in the medical literature. And, what they discovered in dioxins is that the immediate results were not so alarming. It was chloracne on the children. And, but what they discovered over 40 years is, increased cancer in the women, endometriosis. They found that infertility in both men and women, all-cause mortality. And then they looked into the second generation of children born, and they found differences in male fertility and sperm. And, they saw a few things in there as well. So one of the reasons that I am promoting this course is that in a chemical disaster, first of all, you want to protect you and your family, of course, but you want to protect your unborn children. If you're pregnant or if you're looking to get pregnant, as you know, Jenna, preconception care is critical. That's your whole business, right? It's looking at things that will affect fertility, and the effect of these chemicals on fertility are, they're varied, but people don't really understand that. So you want to preserve your fertility and you want to preserve the health of your unborn children.
This might be a hard question because we're also facing this question all the time, especially for these like a low dose or even with the dioxin case, immediately you might not see it. How do you know, if a chemical disaster is actually affecting your health?
How do you know without testing? And that's one of the things that bothers me about the East Palestine is I'm not aware of any testing of the residents of dioxins or really Anything else? I think they did test. I think they did test some people for vinyl chloride, but I just haven't seen. I don't understand. Without testing, how would you know for sure? And so the lack of testing is bothersome. But how would you know? Well, you would, you would get, the chloracne, the children are bleeding from their noses, and people have a lot of lung issues. And so these are some of the ways that you can determine whether or not, you've been exposed with it. But without the proper testing, it's really hard to tie them together, right? So I would like to see more testing, and I would like to, find out more about dioxin levels in East Palestine. In 9/11, I know it was 20 years ago, but I did run across a study that said at the time the dioxin levels measured at 9/11 were about the highest that they had ever seen anywhere. And 20 years ago, you certainly didn't hear this. I didn't hear it.
Yeah, I heard East Palestine, they tested some first responders, but not the residents. But first responder come and then they leave, but then the residents continue to live there, and then they were only evacuated again for a very short time, and then they went back. So again, like without proper testing and also continuous monitoring,
Like
there's no way you would
like in Savisa, Italy, they kept looking. One of the other things they did in Savisa, Italy is they killed a lot of the livestock in the area, right? Because the dioxins gets into our environment, it gets into livestock, gets into milk. And
what should you do to prepare, like help yourself if you believe you're negatively affected by a chemical disaster?
That's actually a hard question, because what I want to say is, go to an environmental medicine doctor and get tested, and then they'll know what to do, and they'll figure out a treatment program for you. But when you go to your conventional medical provider, they're not trained that way. And so they don't know what or what to do. There's a real gap in what I'd like to see happen and what is happening. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing Environmental Medicine International. I want to train doctors in how to do this so that they can bring it into their clinics. I want to see more people doing this.
Now getting to the program, the presentation, can you survive a chemical disaster? If people join the webinar and then join the program, what can they expect?
Yeah, we've got about 4 hours of video. 2 of them it's like the main video talking about what to do to prepare for a chemical disaster. But then we've got all kinds of like supplemental materials. And I have that white paper on vinyl chloride that I think everyone should read. We really spend a lot of time putting that together. It's very excellent. We have a video on how to choose a good water filter. We have a video on how to choose a really good air filter. We have a video on how to properly research chemicals. We have a buying guide, where to get some of the things that we talk about in our video. So those are all of the things that you can expect with our course.
How can people join? How can they sign up?
Yeah. Good question. We're also giving away an Austin air filter worth $855 to one of the first 50 people that registers for the course, not the webinar, the course. But the webinar, if I send you an invitation, will you be able to get it out to?
Yes, we will. We'll post.
I will send you an invitation. I'm shocked. I'm absolutely shocked at how many people have signed up, because what I discovered was our colleagues are so excited about this. They're sending it out to their email list. We have hundreds of people already signed up for this. But I'm going to send you the I'll send you the invitation and you could send it out to your list.
Wonderful, wonderful. We'll send it to the list. We'll also post it in the post promoting this Instagram Live in case people see it later. They can join the webinar and also getting the program.
Right.
This is so wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this. I think everybody needs the training. This is like
agree. Everybody, doctors included, health professionals included.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Dr. Fine.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.